when did you make the decision that you wanted to go into entertainment? I know your family is doctors.
Indian family, we're all doctors. My dad was a doctor. My grandfather was a doctor. I have an uncle who was a doctor, two cousins who were doctors. I actually was the first pre-med drama double major at
Wow.
my first university, which was in Saskatchewan.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I hadn't made a decision to try and pursue the arts professionally. I kind of followed my nose via education in that I was interested in, you know, I was always doing stuff when I was in school and creative drama and the high school musical and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so when I went into university, I assumed I would apply for medical school someday. So I did tick off pre-med as my undergraduate major, but I also knew I wanted to study theater and Shakespeare and the American novel or whatever. And so I hedged my bet in terms of my education. And it was only after a couple of years of university that I realized I'd really like to do this. But again, I had no role models at the time that said, okay, you could have a career in the arts being a brown guy in North America or being a brown guy in Canada. I mean, when I transferred from my original university to the University of Minnesota, I was still the only brown guy. You know, I remember I was in a production of No Place to Be Somebody, which is a famous Black American play. Mm-hmm. And the director had run out of Black actors to be in it. And so, you know, he had to cast me. And I remember I played a character called Machine Dog, who is the blackest, most militant. He was a ghost figure of, you know, he was like a Black Panther on steroids, you know. And I mean, I was way over my head trying to play that part. You know what I mean? Like that kind of, I mean, it was a good challenge in terms of my artistic growth, but I don't know if it was quote unquote appropriate. But you know, that was what he was facing in Minnesota at the time.
Interesting.
So, you know, I just think that it's I don't know what to say. Like you know, this is a tension in how I decided whether to do this professionally. I don't know if I've still decided whether I'm going to do this professionally. You know, it's just something that evolved. I mean, I wasn't, you know, I started as a writer. And the reason I started as a writer was I didn't think I could have a career as an actor because I didn't see any brown actors on stage. I didn't see them on movies and TV shows growing up. So how could I project myself into that? So I didn't plan on being an actor. I wanted to break into film and television. I didn't have an uncle who was a movie producer. I didn't have a movie camera. All I had was a typewriter. I mean, this is how long ago. And so I read a couple of screenplays that I could find. Back then, there was nothing online. Online didn't exist. I found a few paperback copies of screenplays in a bookstore in Minneapolis, and I read them, and then I wrote a little script based on my experience working in a meatpacking plant one summer. And I used that script to get into graduate film school in Toronto. And that script actually got read by one of my profs who turned out to be a producer at the CBC, which is our public broadcaster. And he was producing a TV series. And he said, why don't you look at the pilot and if, you know, think of an idea for an episode, just as a joke. And I came in and I did. And then his producer on the show liked the idea and they hired me to write the episode. And that's how I broke in. And I planned only to be a writer. And then my second or third project was a TV movie for the CBC that was a comedy about an Indo-Canadian guy. And back then, there were no actors of Indo-Canadian background. They actually flew the producer and director to LA to try and find somebody. And they found somebody whose name was Howie Mandel. And I went, what? And they hired a makeup person to paint Howie Mandel brown. This is before Howie Mandel was even famous. Oh, wow. And they auditioned him. And thankfully, they said, it's not a good idea. So at that point, the film was going to be canceled. The whole thing was going to be over. So I begged them before they canceled the movie, let me have a chance at auditioning. Having only acted in drama school and one play outside drama school. And they allowed me to audition, I got the part. And so that's how I started acting. And I've had sort of two parallel careers since then, acting and writing television mostly. Lately, in the last 10, 12 years, it's primarily acting. But, like I said, I hadn't planned on being an actor, and here I am.
It's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing how things work, even when you think it's just on a whim or on a joke, because you never know who's reading it. It's great. When I'm still trying to figure out how your immigrant doctor parents allowed you to be in the entertainment industry.
Well, I think because I had enough success early on,
Okay.
as a writer. I was still in graduate school when I wrote that first script for CBC.
Yeah.
I think they were going, oh, okay, this is great, not knowing that you don't get to do that every day. It was kind of a lucky break. But then, for the first few years, I was very lucky. I got a chance to write for the Muppets. I was one of the original writers of the series Fraggle Rock. And so, in the first 10 years of my professional life, I was fairly successful as a writer, and I think that got my family through the hump. And then, of course, it's an arts career is a rocky road, and I hit the bumps after Fraggle Rock ended. But over time, they saw that for what it's worth, I was able to manage. The funny thing was that when I turned 30, my father turned to my mother, and because he always wanted me to be a heart surgeon. He was a brain surgeon.
Okay.
Heart surgeons are the rock stars of medicine, right? And he apparently turned to my mother and said, "Oh, he'd be just finishing his residency now," And then the last time I was in India, I stayed with my dad's first cousin, so they're the same age.
Yeah.
And he says to me, when your father was a boy, he wanted to be a film star. And I went, aha.
Okay.
So maybe my dad got to live a little vicariously through me, and that made up for all the insecurities.